Well, next up, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great privilege to introduce to you Chance Weston from Thunder Valley CDC. Chance exemplifies leadership in integrating food systems, food sovereignty, and land management with a deep commitment to Lakota indigenous knowledge. As director of the Lakota land systems at Thunder Valley CDC, he combines traditional wisdom and with modern sustainable practices. His initiative, including community education and demonstration farms, are rooted in Lakota principles of reciprocity, reciprocity with the land and sustainability. Chance's holistic view of food sovereignty emphasizes land stewardship that honors the earth people symbiosis. His experience with land management with the Bureau of Indian Affairs underscores his dedication to conserving natural resources and indigenous land rights. By incorporating Lakota knowledge, Chance fosters an environment where giving back to the land and leaving it better for the future generations are practical realities. His leadership embodies Mitakuye Oyase. We are all related, blending cultural respect and environmental stewardship to nurture resilient food systems and sustainable land practices for future generations. Let's give a warm welcome to Chance Weston.
Can everybody hear me? Yes. Thank you for that introduction, Whit. Again, my name is Chance Weston. Give a brief introduction. Homatakyape, Chante Washte Nape, Chuzapalo, La Kochaje, Trashunki Itampi, now Washichu Chaje Mitrawaki, Chance Weston, Namachapelo. Now Wazia Haha, Awati. Na Prain Sinte Milaya Tapika Tioshpa Emataha. Na Oglala Kota Wichasha Hemachalo. Very happy to be here with everyone this evening. I know it's kind of been a long day, but there's been a lot of great information that, from what I've seen. Definitely very happy to be amongst such guests and speakers here. So again, my name. I come from Thunder Valley CDC. I'm the director of Lakota Land Systems, also director of strategy. And so one of the things that we do, we moved from Lakota Land Systems from food sovereignty, just because we felt that a lot of our work, and as you'll see as I explain, has transitioned. We're so much bigger than that. And so one of the biggest things that we tend to see here in our environment is how to create food systems, but not just produce food, but how we produce food, that how we produce for our families, our communities. And one of the biggest things, obviously a glaring reality for all of us, is our relationship to the land. And how do we rebuild what our relationship to the land really looks like? And so we have a few things that we do that with. One of the biggest ones to date right now is our Bison restoration project. So from a Lakota land systems thinking model that we have internally at Thunder Valley, it's taking that intersectionality of what we know as economics, ecology, traditional culture, but specifically as a Lakota first perspective and thought. And so in really creating this, there was some milestones that we had to navigate in terms of economics and ecology. But I think really what it came down to for us is the relationship and that relationality that we have as Lakota people to the land. And how do we begin to impact our environment with the systems that we use. And so in our Bison restoration project, located, it's in the Badlands National Park area on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. It's sitting on about 40,000 acres. And so there's a lot of components there, but we also have a demonstration farm. Someone needs some help? But there's a lot of components that we've learned from that we're able to take advantage of. We started initially from a small scale market garden system and also a regenerative poultry paddock system and geothermal greenhouse. And through the different lessons that we've learned from all these different technologies, the regenerative ag, so to speak, one of the things that we were looking at is a Lakota-centric model of something that, how are we producing from as if our ancestors were here doing it for us also. And so with the Bison Restoration Project and the transition to Lakota land systems, it very much embodies those concepts of how Whitney said about the reciprocity, and I heard a few other speakers talk about the ancient or the systems that we used to use. And so really building off of what we know as traditional ecological knowledge, you tend to hear that term quite often, but what are the mechanics of that? How does that work? And so I think from a lot of perspectives that we've come across and that we've had the opportunity to converse about, trying to incorporate things like Lakota star knowledge, looking at traditional plants as they pertain to rangeland management, as they pertain to soil health indicators, of really beginning to build that bridge between. We had given a presentation before, and it was posed to us that, oh, so what you're doing is regenerative ag, but through an indigenous lens. And I had to laugh at that a little bit because, and my rephrase of that question was like, well, when you look at those, one clearly supersedes the other. And so looking at that and building off of that from a Lakota first perspective, what we're doing is taking our traditional ecological knowledge as Lakota people and putting it in digestible amounts for regenerative ag that they can understand, if we look at it that way. And so when we're looking at our Lakota land systems thinking model as it applies to our Bison Restoration Project, for example, really being able to build the bridge between what ecological monitoring looks like when we're looking at water infiltration, soil organic carbon, the whole slew of things that we're monitoring, correct, but then also from a traditional Lakota perspective, what these things mean to us. And so being able to actually articulate our relationship to the land and to the animals, who we look at as our relatives, being able to have the bison and the buffalo come back, very much not just impactful from a cultural or spiritual side of things, but also how is that impacting the land. And so really being able to dig in, if you may, pun intended, of what things look like on the rangeland, of being able to see the bird populations that will explode, that do explode, that being able to see the different traditional medicinal plants that grow in bison areas as opposed to livestock areas. But then also building off of those things to both create a new model of what it looks like to start to challenge and push back on, let's say in our instance, I used to work for the BIA for many years. Please don't hold that against me. I am starting a reforming employees group. I mean, so if anyone wants to start that, let me know. We can talk about that. But from a BIA perspective, all the red tape, all of the restrictions that come back, but both to create a model that both pushes back and at some point shatters what those things stand for. And we're replacing that with a Lakota-centric model of how not just to bring our relatives back home, but how we can involve our communities and start to change the landscape very much literally in the areas that we live in. And so from a lot of this, we see born from the group that I work with at Thunder Valley, we look at a seventh generation thinking. And for Lakota people, that's not a new concept, by no means. But we tend to look at it through a long arc philosophy or a long arc strategy of being able to think, well, how can we make the changes that we're making now, but how is that going to impact us 7 generations from now? How is that going to impact us 150 years from now? And how do we actually start to input and implement our plans so that way they make the biggest difference in an area that we'll never see in our lifetime, but being able to both know that these things are going to get accomplished. And so what's really unique about 7th generation thinking and the approach that we're taking, the long arc strategy that we're using, is that it's both accounting for the future, the horizon, if you will, of what is coming for the changes that we're trying to make for our people, but also being dynamic enough to where we can make changes on the fly or that we can adjust for our environment, let's say. Because My grandpa used to tell me that as Lakota people, it isn't just that we were the first ecologists, we're actually the first economists as well, of being able to take the littlest amount of possible, being able to utilize it and maximize it the most. And so really taking that to heart when we're looking at seventh generation, thinking of what changes can we make now on our landscape, for example. And so in an example that I always like to give, I'm very much a numbers person. So again, apologies in advance. But for example, in Pine Ridge, out of the 2.1 million usable acres, there's roughly about 1.1 million that are sitting in range units that are utilized for livestock. But how can we start to utilize models like our Lakota land systems thinking, or being able to incorporate it with community members and really start to tackle what that 1 million acres could look like in a permit period, which is 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, and on down the road as we begin to see our relatives, and through the monitoring and the approaches that we're taking, what kind of landscape are we going to be leaving our children? And so I think from those perspectives, this is something that has both been key to my background, my upbringing, but also I think very much from a, like I said, as a Lakota person, of always thinking 7 generations ahead, but also accounting for what the 7 generations before you did. And so this is something, like I said, that we're really taking to heart and really trying to collaborate as we move forward when we're looking at long arc strategy or 7th generation thinking, of what it looks like through a Lakota land systems lens. A few other things, like I said, being a numbers person, of by no means a scare tactic, but when you start to look at the USDA, when we met with them a few times and they give us a statistic like the 2050 statistic of what it will look like by the year 2050 as the Earth approaches 10 billion people. We're going to need to increase our food production capacity by almost 70%. Right now, nobody's on pace to hit that. And so what can we do, not necessarily as a save the world approach, but what can we do in our own backyards and our own communities to mitigate that, to meet that? Because as Lakota people, we're always looking at how can we begin to take care of these things for the future generations as they come. And so really being mindful of how we create these models and how we not just take care of the land, but also what kind of handling, what kind of strategies are we using when we're working with our relatives of Buffalo, that really changing this hard charge shift. And maybe to test that, we can actually try something. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this before. Those of you who are comfortable doing it, by all means. If you're not, it's not a requirement. If you have a neighbor who's willing to sit next to you, if one of you guys want to make a fist, I can't see what's going on, so if you guys want to make a fist, just one of you has to, those of you that want to take part. Your neighbor who's next to you, try to open it. I can't see if anyone's doing it. And squeeze tight, don't let them open it. Squeeze tight. There's probably some struggling. Okay, we can call it there. We can call it there. We don't want to get anybody hurt. But was there any successes in anybody opening the fist? Anyone open it? Anybody? I can't see. Okay. I have a question for anybody, though. Maybe this speaks to our approach on how we do things. How many of you asked? So I think this is indicative of our approach when we're working with the land, when we're working with animals, when we're working with our relatives, when we see them in that light. And so really changing the paradigm, really changing the mindset of how it is that we're working. Are we asking the land, or are we commanding it? Are we demanding this of it? Are we working with it like a relative? That both of our future resides on that. So like I said, that's really something that speaks to me and to my core in doing this kind of work. Like I said, I just kind of hit on the overview, hit on the bullet points of it. But by all means, like I said, we can chat afterwards, but we're doing some bigger things on a larger scale. And I'm just very happy to be here and be happy to share anyone that's willing to have a conversation. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. Like I said, that was a little broad, but no. Well, I definitely appreciate everybody's time. Cutting it a little short. I don't know if I necessarily needed the full minutes, but thank you all for your time. Thanks.